Okay, guys, here we are. Stream has started. We're live. I'm here again with Gaga. This time I've correctly written his name, all in capital. And yeah, today we're gonna discuss a little bit about trade. Say hello, Gaga.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be here again.
Yeah, so last time we actually talked about combat, and we forgot to discuss a very important aspect about combat, actually, which I wanted to actually do now because, yeah, it's something most people don't really do, and which is very effective. So it's called consolidating your troops. The button is there since EU3, I think, and back then I don't think I've ever actually used it. In EU4 I'm actually using it quite often because I don't know if they actually changed this mechanic, but I'm just gotten aware of it now. If your your regiments are low on numbers, they actually have a lower maneuver rating, so they fight worse than normally, which can lose you a lot of wars, and the money you are actually saving, I'm not even sure you are saving any money if you are consolidating and just rebuilding your troops in your home country. Do you have any information on that? Because I haven't done the math.
Well, I don't really know about the exact effects of low strength in combat, but one thing is sure, and that is, if you do not consolidate your regiments, you will lose a lot of battles, even if you have numerical parity with your enemy, because you're simply leaping into combat with understrengthed regiments, and that is actually one of the reasons people lose battles that seem equal, take quite high losses. Because imagine the following scenario: you have 40 regiments all down to half strength, so you have 20,000 troops left. Your enemy has 20,000 troops, but all full regiments. Again, we have the same problem we talked about last week. You can't deploy all your troops because the frontage is too small for that, and you can only use 24 units in this combat. And because they are understrength, they also deal way less damage and break earlier. I don't know the exact details of the lower strength effect. I guess the damage is probably scaled to the number of troops you have in the regiment. So what is very important is to consolidate your troops before a decisive battle. You give up units, and basically it costs money because you have to rebuild regiments after the battle and reduce the number of active regiments you use in your army. But for that one battle where you consolidate your regiments, your combat power will again be up to full strength for all the units you can consolidate. So it is very important to do this, and we forgot it last week. So it's easy to overlook. I think many people overlook it, and actually I haven't used it until the end of EU3 because I was not really aware about the impact of this feature.
I'm not actually quite sure that's the big problem of actually dealing less damage. I have never actually seen those kind of troops dealing less damage in terms of numbers, but I've seen them break more easily. You lose a lot more morale. I think maybe that is scaled depending on troop size. I'm not quite sure. Or maybe if you are below a certain amount of strength in your regiments, they're more likely to actually flee and leave the battle or not fight anymore efficiently. I'm not quite sure exactly what happens. In the wiki it just says the maneuver of the troop is actually reduced. Up if it's over 2/3 of its or 3/4 of its strength, you get only 50% of your maneuver, and if it's under that, you get only 20% or something like that. I'm not quite sure exactly, but in any case, it just reduces your combat efficiency. So be sure to consolidate your regiments, especially if you have a lot of troops. Maybe try and do the following, what I started to do: just separate your infantry from the rest of the army, which is quite easily done. Consolidate only them, and then unite them again with the army and move further away, because consolidating artillery and cavalry maybe isn't really that effective. I'm not quite sure if it actually does anything except losing you money, because if they are not fighting in the front lines and are not shot, it shouldn't really matter how much strength they have, does it? I mean, the artillery now.
Well, I guess we would have to run some tests to find out about that.
Yeah, maybe I can do that over the weekend. Come up with some numbers next time we actually do it. To actually find out if it does anything, if your artillery is weaker or not.
Would certainly be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. But that's it about the last week's oversight. We wanted to focus on trade this week. So, do you want to start just with explaining how trade just generally works? I mean, just a short rundown, because I guess everybody already knows how trade is working, but still, let's start with the basics.
The basics, okay, let's see. In general, you can see that every province has a so-called trade value, and this trade value is sent to a certain center of trade. And the center of trade is basically a province with a certain province modifier. It's called important center of trade, and it's basically the regional point where all the trade is gathered and redistributed between those who have trade power inside this trade node. Basically, if you open the trade menu, the trade map mode, you see a lot of boxes on the map which represent the centers of trade and the directions that go in and out from these trades.
Yeah, I'm just gonna open the game now to actually show people what you're saying, because it's a little bit hard to follow.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. So basically you have the trade nodes, and these trade nodes are connected via trade lines, which are represented by lines with arrows moving on them, showing the direction where trade is flowing. So one important thing to take away from this is trade is only flowing into one direction in AO4. So you can't basically move trade value from Europe to the Americans, for example. It will always flow back to Europe, and you can't really influence the direction of these trade lines. Yeah, and the thing is, you have merchants, and you can place these merchants into a certain center of trades to project trade power and select where you want to steer trade. And there's a lot of trade tutorials on the Paradox forums you can read that will actually explain all the stuff that is important quite nicely. So for the basics, you have the trade value, and the other important thing is trade power. Trade power is also created by provinces. It's also created by merchants, by light ships, and basically the game calculates how many trade power is inside a trade node, and then it distributes the trade value that a node has between those who have trade power, and it's a share equal to the percent of trade power. So if you have 50% trade power in a trade node, you will get 50% of that trade value from the trade node, and you can either collect it, you can move it forward, and yeah, that's basically the thing you want to do to make efficient use of the trade thing.
So just to explain this a little bit better and a little bit more graphically, looking at my screen right now, if you press the trade map mode, you get this map mode, this overview of the trade nodes and the regions that are affiliated to them, and all that thing. And if you press on the trade window thingy here, you will get this very informative statistic and overview,
which is, by the way, covered by my picture in the stream.
Well,
at least the upper top.
Just the upper half, it's not all covered. So the good thing about this is you can actually see on one glance how much trade power you actually have in the node, because you can see this graphic and you will just look for your color. If you don't see it, it's very small, you probably don't have a lot. And you do have...
Actually, you can also see it on the map itself. The small flags below the trade nodes are sorted by the amount of trade power.
Yeah, exactly. You can just hover over them and the tooltip will tell you how much trade power you have. If you want a more detailed explanation, you can just scroll down to your country at the bottom, and just the tooltip will tell you exactly where all your trade power is coming from. So if you take the Netherlands and look at where the trade power comes from, you will see most of it is from just the provinces in the area. Also, you will see what the other countries that are trading there are having, how much trade power they're getting from provinces, which provinces are better for it, and everything that's important. So, if you want to improve at trading, just use this map mode a lot and watch exactly what is important and how... No, because the Netherlands has a couple of lightships here. I could just take them, send them to Antwerpen to actually improve the trade power, and you will... I think at the end of the month see the effect taking place. Look, I just got a lot more trade power just by sending these ships there. So you will get the overview completely only from this mode. You don't actually need to use anything else, which is very important. Now, the more trickier stuff is to actually find out where it is efficient to actually collect and where it is efficient to send trade forward. This was pretty easily done in before the latest patch, because you could just create trade chains which started somewhere in Asia and went all the way around Africa and into some trade center in Europe, mostly ending up in Antwerp or in Venice, and you would get just massive trade centers. How that works is when you send a merchant to a trade center and tell it to forward trade, it actually increases the trade volume of that center by 5%. So you actually send more stuff than actually is there, which I don't know how they do it. It's probably magic.
No. It's trade value. So basically, because you're moving the goods towards another trade node that is far away from the production location, it's worth more money. It's not more goods. It's more trade value.
Definitely. That's a better way to actually look at it. Yeah, that's good enough.
Just think of it as porcelain from China sent to Antwerp is worth more money there than if you would say move it just one province in China.
Yeah.
One trade node in China.
Now, before the patch, you could actually, each merchant would increase that bonus by 5%. I think it would cap at 20%. And they nerfed it for good reason, because the values that would appear in Europe were just ridiculous. So now I think the value is kept at 9.5 or something like that.
I don't know the exact changes, but yeah, we had some ridiculous stuff like at the center of trade with a trade value of like 1,000 plus ducats because of the increase from the trade nodes around Africa. I don't know. I think the thing was every merchant increased the trade value. So if you had 4 merchants from different countries, this increased the value by like
20%,
10%, 20%, something like that. Yeah. And that got nerfed now. So basically, what it means is it's less effective and efficient to make long merchant chains that send goods down to a European trade node.
Yeah, well, because what everybody would just instinctively do, in my opinion at least, that's what I have done for the most time, is just try and send as much trade to your capital node as possible. And that works quite fine if you're, for instance, England, or if you're the Netherlands, or even if you're something like the Ottomans and send everything to Constantinople. But if you're something like Spain or France, things get a little bit more difficult. Because if you look at Spain, Spain is pretty much partitioned into 3 separate trade nodes. It has Sevilla, which Portugal, Morocco and Algeria are part of at the start of the game. It has Bordeaux, which is mostly monopolized by the French, because they have so much more stuff in that trade node. And you also have a little bit of Genoa trade node in Aragon, which also is mostly monopolized by the Italian states, or by France again, if it conquers Savoy or something like that. It's very hard to actually get much value out of the stuff that you can send into your home node, because you have to give a part of that trade that you are accumulating on the way to other countries, which you don't want to do. You actually want to get everything for yourself. So I think it's more efficient sometimes to just collect in an overseas trade node where only you are. because it's just more you, even if you get a penalty, because if you are not collecting in your trade in your home node, you're getting a pretty big penalty. I think it's something like 60%.
It was 50%. Maybe it was increased. Basically, what the game does is it reduces your effective trade power by 50% or even more when you're collecting outside from your home nodes in overseas trade nodes. This was done due to the fact that many people would just collect all the trade value in the Caribbean, for example, and most of the trade wouldn't even reach Europe, and that was not really part of the game design because the game is truly about controlling the nodes and not just all the nodes and the chain of the nodes connected to each other, and not a single node that basically runs the whole network dry.
Yeah, but exactly that's the most efficient thing to do actually right now, and I think that's a big influence on how colonization works in this game as well. Because if you look at America, you have a couple of very big trade nodes here. You have the Chesapeake Bay, you have the Caribbean, and I think that's actually about it. You have those two, which are very big and very important. And you could say that the Ivory Coast is an important trade center as well, because it collects from Brazil and it sends stuff to Sevilla as well. Well,
yeah, there's certainly some trade nodes that are strategically important, and more important than others. I think the most important trade nodes in the game are Chesapeake Bay, because it controls basically the trade from the North American territories towards either England, the North Sea, or Bordeaux. And the other one is the Caribbean, because it either relays trade to Chesapeake Bay, or to Bordeaux, or to Seville. And so all the major colonizing powers have an interest in controlling this node. And actually you can, if you, the AI will often reroute Ivory Coast trade to the Caribbean, because it's easier, for example, for Portugal to go there instead of running around Safi and the Mauritanian coast. So if you're playing England, for example, dominating the Caribbean and Chesapeake Bay can actually mean that you control like 80 to 90% of the New World trade value.
Definitely, yeah. I've actually just played yesterday with a couple of... I played the multiplayer game, which was pretty far into it. I mean, it was 60-90 or something like that. And they gave me Great Britain to sub for someone, and it was exactly this case. They had almost all of the Chesapeake Bay trade node controlled. I think Scandinavia had a little bit from it, and they practically controlled half of the Caribbean. And because Great Britain is so good at building light ships, I could control both of them without any problems, and I would get enormous amounts of money out of it. And the thing is, also, I would just collect the trade in the Chesapeake Bay itself, because I was controlling about 95% of the trade there, if I used a couple of light ships, something like 40. So there was no actual point to sending that trade further to Britain, where it's easier for someone like the Netherlands to actually steal the trade from you by just sending a massive fleet of 100 light ships into London, and you would lose because you don't usually send a lot of stuff to your home node if you are the only person who has provinces in it, are you?
Well, the thing is, for one, you must take into account that you get that your home node is always collecting, even without a merchant. So, when you place a merchant in your home trade node, you actually get a 10% boost to your collected trade value, or better said, to the money you get from the trade value. So if you get 100 trade value from the node, and you have a merchant placed there with a 10% trade income modifier, that's the important thing. Trade income modifier modifies how much money you make from trade value. You get basically 110 ducats. So the thing is, collecting your home node is quite efficient because it gives you a small boost to the trade income modifier.
That's an interesting point. I actually don't see it here in the modifier list. Are you sure that's correct?
It should be. I mean,
I'm just looking here at Netherlands. If you look at the screen, it says 65% from trade efficiency, 10% from Dutch Republic, Dutch ambitions give another 15%, and fast negotiations 10%. And I guess that's these are all country modifiers. It doesn't say anything about the merchant. But let's just make a test. Let's just get the merchant away from it, it doesn't seem to have affected the trade whatsoever. Let's let the month pass.
You know, let me quickly go through the files. If they changed it, I should be able to locate this change.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make any kind of difference if there's a collector or not in the trade node. It's just 2 trade power added. I guess that would be a good buff towards that, because most people actually don't use a merchant in their trade node whatsoever, because it doesn't really do anything. Increasing the amount of trade you have in your home node by 10% would definitely be an incentive to actually send the trade from the New World into Europe.
Well, it was in the game. I mean, when I wrote my trade guide, the merchant gave this bonus, and it was the sole reason to have a merchant in your home COT. And
yeah, I guess they must have changed it in the last patch. Maybe in an attempt to actually decrease the ridiculous amount of trade that would go to Europe.
I don't think that would have been their intention, actually. Let me quickly check the.
Okay, while you check
the
files, we can actually discuss this thing actually, because how much would actually be needed? How much control would you need to have in a node to actually make forwarding the trade efficient? I think you need to have something over 85%. Don't you? Because I'm just thinking about it. If you increase your trade by, let's say you increase it by the maximum allowed at the moment, you can increase it by 9.5%. So I guess it also depends on the amount of trade you are actually getting. Because if you can increase, let's say you have 100% of the Caribbean and you want to send it to Chesapeake Bay to collect there. If you increase it by 9.5%, you have actually, let's say 10%. You have 110% of the trade value reaching the Chesapeake Bay. And to actually get something out of it, let's see. You would need to have... how do you calculate this? I guess you would have...
Yeah, exactly. Matty noted that it depends basically on how much trade power have you in the node where you're redirecting to.
Yeah, exactly. That's
node.
what I was thinking about. How much would you have to have in that node where I'm redirecting it to? So I guess it has to be more than 100% if I multiply 110 times this x, which we are looking for. So it's something like 100 divided by 110. Let's actually see. And I've studied mathematics and I can't do basic arithmetics in my head, so there you have it. So 100. So you have to have over 91% control of the trade node to actually get equal amount of trade value out of it. So in principle this would mostly never happen. So if I'm to think about it, I think it's actually at the moment more effective to just collect the trade everywhere it's possible, doesn't it? If you at least if you're controlling 100% of the node.
Yes, that's if you control the nodes strong and firmly and you have no competition over there, it's usually better to collect it in overseas nodes, yes. But the thing is, by collecting overseas nodes, you make yourself vulnerable to enemy light ships. Because if your enemy can manage to get his light ship somewhere in that trade node, for example, if he has a port somewhere in the area and it's within a trade range, a naval range, and he can send his light ships, because you get a 50% penalty on your trade power, his light ships will basically be twice as effective against you to steal from that node.
Yeah, it actually seems to be something like 70% minus. If you look at the collect from trade not in capital, minus 70%. That's a little bit extreme.
And that was increased, actually. Interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
So a lot of changes I haven't really gotten hold of during the last patch. I guess I have to play more.
Yeah, you have to play more without mods, I guess.
Well, play more in general. I just need more
Yeah.
time. So maybe an 8th day of the week or something like that. 2 additional hours per day.
Yeah.
oh
So yeah, the
well.
thing is, if you are collecting not in your home node, you get a big penalty on your trade, which is fine if you are actually controlling all of the trade in a node. But it's as Gaga said, quite difficult to actually keep controlling, because you get that massive penalty. You get the penalty on everything that's there, not only on the trade power you are getting from the provinces, but also on the trade power you're getting from lightships. So the thing is, if you are, especially in the Caribbean, I can give that as a good example. If you are just controlling the Caribbean, there are lots of provinces where you can just base a big enough fleet, say, let's say 50 lightships or something like that, and just send them to patrol the Caribbean, because that will disrupt their trade. You will get more out of it. You can just redirect it to the trade nodes you think are more important for yourself, and where you can actually control the trade way better. So if you're, for instance, Portugal, and England is controlling the trade in the Caribbean, just send some lightships, redirect it to, let's say, the Ivory Coast. Or I don't think you can actually to the Ivory Coast. You have to send it to Sevilla. So you do that, and you are getting a little bit out of it, besides not having anything if you don't. Now, let's talk a little bit about how would you strategize using trade nodes as Spain, Portugal, and France? Because if you are in one of those countries, you have to negotiate with your ally or with your other countries that are in that trade node. How do you go about doing that? Because I don't really know. Is it more effective to actually just say, okay, we're not gonna cannibalize each other, we're just gonna cooperate in terms of trade. Everything we get out of the new world, we are trying to get into our home node, and we are going to, just partition everything equally like brothers? Or would it be more effective to try and, start a naval race and just try and get the upper hand and monopolize the trade node?
Well, it's more of a diplomatic question, actually. I mean, if you are friends with the Netherlands, you would certainly want to give them a share of the money from the New World, and if you don't do it, I'm pretty sure your relations will deteriorate quite rapidly, because trade is actually so important in EU4 that it is not only of strategic importance to get naval bases in overseas territories to basically control the trade flow with your fleets.
Yeah.
But it's also a diplomatic tool. I mean, embargoes are really powerful in EU4, and trade
How much do
wars
embargoes actually do?
Embargoes reduce the enemy you embargo, the trade power of the enemy you embargo, by your relative power in the trade node. So if you have like 50% trade power in Bordeaux, and you embargo Burgundy, which has, let's say, 20% trade power, then it will get a minus 50% modifier on its trade power because of your embargo.
Aha, okay.
So it's a quite powerful tool to keep someone out of the nodes where you are powerful. And the thing is, cooperating can be extremely powerful. I mean, imagine a cooperation between Portugal and Spain, and these two reroute trade from Asia, from China, down all the way throughout the Indian coast, around Africa, and they get like 5 to, let's say, 7.5% if they both place merchants in every trade node for each forwarding trade. Even then, with the nerfed trade value increase, that's a really powerful chain. And if they can manage to hold control of the Ivory Coast, where the trade can be siphoned off towards the Caribbean, and if they can manage to control Seville, they basically have a really, really powerful trade network by cooperating. So cooperation with an ally is a really powerful tool in the trade game for EU4. And as for the arms race with the fleet, I think it's depending on the stage of the game. During the early game, the trade values are usually quite low, so it's not really worth the money to build light ships. I mean, you could still build light ships up to your force limit and control the most important nodes. It might even out, but usually what you have to keep in mind is light ships are terrible in combat.
Yeah.
Even galleys are more powerful than light ships, and I think even transport.
Yeah, the transports are also more powerful, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, so don't count on your light ship fleets for trade that are used for trade to be efficient in any war. They can fight, but they will usually need superior odds. I mean, 10 big ships can basically annihilate a whole fleet of, let's say, 20, 25, maybe 30 to 40 light ships.
Yeah, that actually happens to me ridiculously often. I just forget one trade fleet somewhere in the Atlantic, and then my enemies just come there with like 2 big ships and a couple of light ships, and they just destroy a 50 or 20 fleet of light ships just straight off. I mean, it happened to me yesterday. They just came with a ridiculously low amount of big ships and a couple of light ships, and they destroyed like a 3 times bigger light ship fleet I had.
Yeah, I mean, I once played France and lost 250 light ships in a surprise attack by the English, or Great Britain in that case, when they declared war on me. It wasn't AI, so it wasn't even careful planning, it was just coincidence, because that fleet was in the Caribbean siphoning the trade towards Bordeaux. And yeah, so be careful about your light ships, where you use them.
Yeah, I think that could be a very good, tool for wars. I mean, just wars to destroy the enemy light ship fleet. At least to have a little bit of a bigger impact in the colonies for, like, say, what does it take to build a light ship fleet again? Maybe 1 or 2 years. So that could
depends on your province setup. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Naval buildings, and the more province you have, the faster it is. I mean, even the cost of rebuilding a light ship fleet is quite significant.
Yeah.
Even if you take something like modifiers into account, because I mean, the light ships are, I think, by default a bit below half a big ship from the cost value.
I think light ships are 20 base cost, and big ships are 50, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So light ships, losing a light ship is pretty bad, and the naval power is actually much more important in AO4 because of the fact that you need the light ships to project your trade power in overseas territory, because you can be a pretty powerful colonial nation. Light ships are really effective at rerouting trade. I mean, a single light ship is probably as effective as an unupgraded province, probably 2 unupgraded provinces. And they become a bit better when the tech progresses. I think they get 1 trade power per
they
tier.
get like first tier is 3, second tier is like 3.5. We can actually just check to be sure. And I think afterwards it's 4.5 and 6. Let's see. Oh, we can't actually check the earlier models.
Yeah, you can do that with.
Oh, so early frigates are 4. Yeah, I think it increases by 0.5 on each stage.
Okay, so basically the ships become more effective, but provinces can also become a lot more powerful when you get the buildings inside. So light ships are very important during the early stage of the game, when their trade power value is relatively high compared to provinces. And as the game progresses, they become a bit less effective at controlling the trade in larger nodes. I mean, the Caribbean is probably a place, if it is split up between several players, where the ships still make a big difference. Stuff in like Chesapeake Bay, when you have that under control of a single nation, I guess it's probably pretty easy to lock down with just trade buildings and provinces, and the trade power gained from that. So yeah, light ships are efficient early on. They become a little less efficient as the game progresses, but since the trade values increase, you can just build more of them, and they're still cost effective.
Yeah, definitely.
And in general, you should always try to max out your naval force limits during the mid and late stage of the game. Just build as many big ships as you need. I mean, a lot of people make the mistake to not build any big ships, and that can work if you're playing a peaceful game, or if you're playing against the AI. I guess against the AI you need like a dozen big ships.
Yeah, and that's enough.
Power later on, it's enough. But a human player can actually screw you over quite bad.
Yeah, I mean, even as France, you can go above your force limit. And I've had a game where I was Britain and France just had like 50 big ships, which I didn't realize he was building, and I was completely vulnerable because I only had like 30 or something like that. The big ships are really, really powerful in this game. I mean, if I think back to U3, big ships weren't that big of a deal. I mean, yes, you should have like 20 big ships or something like that, but the most important thing was to have that meat shield in front of it. Galleys or transports or anything else to actually eat the damage done by the enemy big ships, and you would just destroy the enemy, even if he had more.
Do you remember that Scandinavia game? I think you were Spain, I was Scandinavia, where had this 5,000 galleys.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Selecting the stack basically froze the game for 20 seconds, and we negotiated de-armament.
De-armament, yeah.
Sank the ships off the coast of Spain and got some money in return.
No, I think I was Britain, Spain was someone else, but yeah, Spain paid you actually to destroy your fleet, which was hilarious.
And I built big ships for the money he gave me, basically coming out with profit from the whole situation.
Yeah, that was really a fun situation.
That was before the naval force limit was changed, because in the early games of AO3 you basically just paid 100% extra upkeep when you exceeded your force limit, even by like 200%. Yeah. And now it's different and you can't really do that. So galleys are also a lot less effective, and they unfortunately don't have trade power in the base game. You can mod it in, but the AI won't use it, so it's not really...
Yeah, I think I'm really wondering why they wouldn't build in the trade power, at least in the inland seas.
Yeah, because you'd have to add checks for that, you have to...
Yeah,
and I think the problem is the ocean locations are only checked for combat and attrition in the basic code. I mean, because if you check, you can find some provinces where basically it's not 100% inland sea. I think Asia has one or two, because the terrain is defined in the graphic files from the map folder. And basically what you have to do is you would need to make a script that checks whenever the fleet is in a province if it's inland sea, and then you have to check if the trade centers have only inland sea provinces, and then you had to update the movement algorithm for the ships if they are...
Oh yeah, I guess that's a little bit complicated because some provinces may not be in the inland sea.
Exactly, so it's basically...
So you need to adjust that. Yeah, that's a little bit complicated. But I don't think it's undoable, but I think it may be abused later on. Yeah, especially with countries like Venice, who have such a big bonus on galleys.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to write the code, and I don't know how resource efficient that would be. And actually, light ships do the trick, and you could basically just simulate the advantage of Venice in regards of trade by giving them some extra force limit or stuff like that. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's not really necessary to give galleys trade value. If they can add it in later on, yeah, that would be okay, what would be nice. But you would really have to work hard to prevent abuses like 1,000 galleys in the Caribbean and nonsense.
Yeah, I'm actually quite curious why they didn't, make at least parts of the Caribbean inland sea. I think that would be nice. I mean, I know historically galleys weren't really used in the Caribbean because, yeah, you would have frigates and stuff like that. But I think later on you get something like Archipelago frigate or something like that, which is actually a galley type ship. And why that thing isn't considered, you can't use it efficiently outside of the Mediterranean and the Baltic Sea. I don't know. It's a little bit sad, in my opinion, that you have so little uses for galleys in general.
Well, galleys are efficient to fill up your force limit in the early and mid game. I mean, now that they can take on light ships, they are actually quite powerful combat vessels in the Mediterranean in the early game, and even in the mid game stages, they are still very cost effective. If you can get some decent naval force limit from ideas, and by the way, I'm really happy they scaled down Grand Navy to 50%. Force bonus.
Definitely.
It was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And even now it's still powerful, and Venice is probably one of the countries that can benefit quite a lot from building the higher tier naval buildings to get higher naval force limits, stuff like that.
Especially if they're going for Italy.
Yeah, so galleys are not great, but they do their job quite fine. I mean, big ships fight, light ships trade, and galleys fill up your naval force limit until you peak and fill it.
Yeah, so and especially they changed the naval limit from the Holland ideas as well, because I think that was 100% as well. So with Holland you could practically go with a 300% naval limit, which was completely ridiculous and overpowered. But now it's still 50%, so it's in total 100%. It's still very, very good to go for a fleet with the Netherlands, but it's not that bad as it was previously.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, thanks to the naval buildings, the problematics of the EU3 franchise have been somewhat diminished, because in EU3 you had a problem before they added these buildings, that the naval force limit was calculated by the number of coastal provinces, and so a country like, and the base tax on these provinces. I think it's still done that way, but back in the old days, basically Great Britain would always have a better and bigger fleet than, let's say, the Netherlands or Scandinavia, regardless how much money these nations made. As Scandinavia could basically make 5 times more money than Great Britain, but you would still not be able to compete in a naval race because they just got bigger force limit from the higher tax coastal provinces. So yeah, now we have a way, and that would have skewed the trade game in EU4 a lot if they.
How is it now exactly? I mean, beside the buildings and stuff, is it not still the same thing? I mean, just taxes and buildings.
But the buildings are the thing that turns the whole thing around, because the buildings allow nations with a lot of poor provinces to get.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah. You can actually.
And I guess,
do you get full naval limit from buildings you build in the New World?
I don't think there's any modifier that is reducing that. Let me quickly check.
Because I haven't seen it either, but of course to get with a small and rather not that good a country in terms of economy, it's harder to even get to the New World and start colonizing to actually, build up that that province space to actually increase with buildings. I haven't really seen a possibility to be there really fast enough to actually profit from that.
I just checked, at least in the overseas static modifier, there's no entry for reduced naval force limit. You get reduced recruit speed for ships and troops. You basically take twice the time to build ships in the New World in overseas provinces, but there's no reduction for the naval force limit, at least not in the static modifiers. Maybe the code itself somehow calculates it differently, but you should be able to see. No, you just get it from ports. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any penalty for.
I don't actually think so. I've never seen it. If there is one. Yeah.
So, but anyway, we got a little carried away, I think, with
the Navy. But yeah, I think it ties in pretty well with trade. So I don't think anyone really minds that much.
Yeah. So to sum up, the Navy is a very important tool for the whole trade game.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a good trader, you need a big navy. And that's also one of the problems with landlocked trade nodes. You simply don't have much influence on them. You can't really... All you can do is placing a merchant there, and a merchant is ridiculously ineffective.
Yeah, it's not really doing much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, except building trade buildings, there's not much you can actually do. You could build manufactories, that's also a thing you could do, but that's pretty much it then.
Yeah, I guess you could add decisions, and you could basically add more modifiers that influence the trade power of other partners in the node. For example, let's say you have a merchant in Austria, and Austria is in a big civil war, and rebels have taken most of the provinces, and then their trade power diminishes, and you can have more control about the trade node and stuff like that. So
or maybe
there's a lot of modding potential in there, but the base game doesn't give you much control about land trade routes, so you basically have to stick to the naval ones.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to play a trade game, you just have to stick to the naval, If you're something like Austria or, I don't know, Germany, or you want to form Germany, there's not much point to going into navies. That's also the thing I actually like about the current Ottoman Empire. There's a really big incentive to actually go for navy, because a big chunk of money you can get from trade, because you can practically control the Asian trade for the better part of the early game and the mid game actually as well.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is even if you don't get the full value from trade, every took it, you'd suck away from a trade node. Every trade value point you suck away from a trade node or redirect from a trade node is a point of trade value less for your enemies.
Yeah.
So it can be quite efficient to redirect trade routes to other nodes to harm your enemies. I mean,
Yeah.
you could basically say, okay, I reroute trade from the Ivory Coast or from the Caribbean so it doesn't fall into hands of Spain. I don't get all of the trade I reroute, but the Spanish lose more money than basically I
Lose.
do not make by
Yeah, yeah.
collecting.
Yeah, that's
It
a
can
good
also be a
point.
powerful strategy.
But I mean, yeah, that's actually a valid strategy to try and harm your enemies more than you actually harm yourself by, cutting away trade. Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, well, I don't know. Let's talk about how many people have been complaining about the trade being very rigid and lacking dynamic elements like EU3 had, where you could create new trade nodes or centers of trades, and here you can't. There's just this fixed amount of trade nodes with fixed provinces. You can't modify it in any way, you can't influence it in any way. It doesn't change over time, it doesn't change by start date, it doesn't do anything. What's your opinion on it? Because for me personally, this is not something that's too big a problem, but I would like a little bit more dynamic elements into the trade system.
Yeah, I think the trade system shows that the Europa Universalis is a quite Eurocentric game. I mean, you can see it just by looking at the trade routes and checking where are they going. And I think the system works okay. There are some cases where I'd say it's a bit, well, it would be nice if you could basically reverse direction of some trade routes, especially when the geographical situations around them change. Let's say the trade route, for example, one problem I have is there's absolutely no trade route from Seville into the Mediterranean. So even if you are Venice and you control Italy and basically even if you would control all the territory around the Mediterranean Sea, you would never be able to effectively gather trade from the New World.
Yeah.
Because there's no trade route leading into the Mediterranean from that side.
I mean, I guess the only way to get it would be to route the New World trade through Japan and around Asia to actually get it into Venice. And that's ridiculously difficult. I don't know how anyone would do that.
You can't even do that effectively because the trade is only going from Mexico to Japan, and that trade route is only feeded by the northwestern California trade.
Yeah, so I think California and maybe Peru or something like that as well. I'm not sure.
No, Peru is going to Panama and Panama is going to Caribbean. So another candidate that is suffering a lot from that is Sweden and basically Scandinavia, because they only can grab the trade value from Hudson Bay, and they can, I think, from Chesapeake Bay redirect the trade there.
I wouldn't say Scandinavia is so bad off. I mean, depending on who you start with. If you start with Norway, you are ridiculously good, because you can monopolize the North Sea quite easily and just take everything out of the Chesapeake Bay and Hudson Bay if you want to. And if you're starting with Denmark, it's the same thing. You just have to redirect it once more out of the North Sea into Lübeck. Because Lübeck, if you are playing Denmark, should be under your control most of the time.
Yeah, but Sweden, for example, has a really bad time.
Yeah, Sweden is crap in this regard. They can't really get it anyway.
I think there's another strategy that is important in that regard, because the location of your capital determines the home trade node. So if you move your capital, you can actually change your home trade node.
Yeah.
For example, as Spain, if you move your capital into the Bordeaux trade node, you basically get this as your home node. If you move it to a province that is part of the Seville trade node, this will be your home trade node. And I guess if you somehow manage to move your capital in overseas to, let's say, America, you can make that your home trade node, and that is a quite powerful strategy for miners, I think. Just try to colonize a province in America, then give up your home territory and basically move over to the New World and settle the provinces there. And
yeah, but how many countries can effectively do that? Let's be honest. I mean, It's mostly Portugal, let's say. It is a valid country to do that with if you are playing multiplayer or even in single player. I mean, I'm doing a let's play of Brittany right now where I've done the same thing. I've moved my capital to the New World and gave up the European territory. I don't really know what other countries. Maybe if you're playing single player and you can get Ireland to do that as well. Or maybe some smaller countries like Navarra or Holland if you are getting it. Or any kind of Dutch minor or something like that. Maybe the Hansa.
Basically all the German minors, all the minor states in Europe could try to do that. All they have to do is basically either defeat Norway to take a province from Greenland, Iceland, and then move to Greenland, or you have to basically wait and colonize Greenland.
Yeah, or you can just get, what you call it, fleet basing rights and just go and colonize normally.
Yeah, all that, and that's all. I mean, those two things are a big exploit. Moving your capital in overseas provinces is, in my opinion, a broken mechanic that should not be allowed. I mean, why? I mean, okay, Portugal did it in the Napoleon War.
Yeah, because their home territory was occupied, that's why. It wasn't because they wanted to.
Yeah, so, I mean, and you also forgo all the overseas penalties by doing that and get full manpower from the provinces, full tax and stuff like that. It is a really, really borderline game mechanic to abuse.
Yeah.
So you can do it, but I don't think you should do it. Anyway, so coming back to the trade system, I think the trade system works okay. I mean, I always imagine what could you do with that system in regards of Victoria, because that game has a lot of more economic focus, and I think it's a great start and a great base to implement in maybe other Paradox games in the future.
Definitely,
It works quite nice. There are a few instances where I'd say it would be nice if you could change or redirect trade routes, but then again that is not possible because of the engine, because all the trade nodes are basically connected in a game file and you cannot really unconnect them or reconnect them in the game without having to again change a lot of code and programming. So yeah, the system has its flaws. I mean, for example, one thing I really hate is that there is no trade route between Ceylon and Zanzibar, so you have to go to the Gulf of Aden.
Yeah.
The countries leech a lot of that, and historically, I think a lot of ships bypassed that part of the trade route in the later stage of the game.
Yeah, especially if you have all the Indian Ocean islands, you should be able to just, directly send it to Africa. Maybe
they can improve the mechanic with a later add-on or DLC, I don't know. But as for now, it's working, okay? It adds a lot of strategic depth to the game, where it makes naval bases more important, where trade fleets become important, where trade wars are legitimate option to hurt your enemies, where trade agreements are quite powerful between nations that have same home nodes and stuff like that. I mean, it's one of the better changes from EU3 to EU4.
Oh, definitely.
You really don't want the merchants back from EU3.
Yeah. It's definitely a vast improvement on EU3. The only thing is, I mean, I can remember the first time I've actually seen a developer diary about trade and the first developer video about trade, where they showed something about Venice sending a fleet into Alexandria, and then and only then could he actually protect the trade from Alexandria and redirect it to Venice. I think it's sad that they removed that. They removed the necessity of having a province in that trade node to be actually able to protect the trade. I think that was a good mechanic. I can't really figure out why they would remove it, but I guess they had a good reason.
Well, I think it's still done by basically having trade range, preventing you from protecting trade. So it's not really gone. It's just a bit more intuitive and less abusive. I mean, if you would have to own a province, everybody would basically go for Egypt and take one province there to redirect trade if they have interest and stuff like that. And
as you said, actually, you're right. You can still do it without any problem right now. You take a province there, and then you have the trade range to actually influence it.
Yeah, or you take a province nearby. You don't even have to take a province there.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You have to only be nearby. You don't have to have it in the trade region itself.
And that again improves the strategy of
I
owning
guess so.
bases. Basically, let's say England. If you're England or Great Britain, you would want to have like Gibraltar, you would want to have Malta, because each of these bases is a strong point for influencing trade and projecting trade power in these areas. So I think the mechanic has not really been removed. It's just made, just done in another way. And I mean, you still need a merchant to control the direction of trade rerouting. So you're limited by your merchants when you're trying to reroute stuff. Because if you don't place a merchant, all the trade power you have is used to forward trade equally in all directions that go out from the node, stuff like that. So basically, it's not so much about owning the province of the trade node, but placing your merchants in a smart way to maximize your impact on the trade networks.
Yeah. Okay, let's Mate made a good point here. He said it's not a big problem to actually how Scandinavia and Italy and stuff works, because it's not efficient to actually steer the trade away. The problem with that is the following: it's not efficient if you can monopolize a trade node. Then it's not efficient, of course. But if you can't, if you need to steer away the trade from another country, I mean, let's say you're in the Chesapeake Bay and you're Scandinavia, you will have the northern half most likely, and England will have the rest. So you'll need to fight against the English to actually get the trade. If you both collect the trade, England will just get the better of it. In any case, you'll just get less money out of it. And if anyone else sends ship there just to hurt you and redirects the trade, you will lose a lot of money. So it's better, especially if the English want to collect trade there, they will get the penalty. So why not just redirect the trade into the North Sea, where you can control it much easier than you can in the Chesapeake Bay. And if you're Norway and you have the capital in the Northern Sea region, you can actually get the money without any penalty. And if you've started as Denmark, you can just redirect it once more, because you are mostly controlling the North Sea as well.
Yeah, one thing about a trade game is it is very dynamic, because in single player the AI usually makes subpar decisions, and it is actually trying to trade in the trade nodes where you're collecting in oversea. So basically, if you start collecting in Chesapeake Bay and the AI has any chance to move a light fleet there, it will try to do that. It is actually quite smart in that regard, but still it's not as powerful as human players. So the trade game is basically more important in multiplayer games when human opponents can use your setup and you have basically to have to act and react all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you must take into account who can access the trade nodes, who is doing what, and I think forwarding trade can be more efficient than collecting and oversee. It just depends a lot on the situation. And yes, forwarding trade has become less efficient because the bonus has been reduced quite a bit, but even 5% is still an okay bonus.
Yeah, and let's not forget about what we talked about earlier. It's not so much about, you getting a lot of trade, but it's also about taking trade away from your enemy. Of course, if you're allied with Britain and you want to just, partition the trade fairly between you two, yes, by all means do that. But if you're in a conflict with them, it's much more efficient to actually redirect the trade to nodes you can control better than just leave it there and just say, okay, Britain is getting like 3 times as much money as I do, but I'm getting something as well, so I'm just gonna be okay with it. That's not the ideal, mentality if you want to do something like that.
Yeah, and another thing in multiplayer games is probably the fact that if people know how the trade game works, they are, I think, less likely to allow people to get total control of, let's say, the Caribbean. I mean, if the people playing the game know what they do and know how trade works, they will basically pile up against anyone who has managed to get total control of the Caribbean and will force to redistribute the provinces there if the trade interests are in this area. So it's coming down to the behavior of the human players on how you should basically play the trade game. Against the AI, it's usually good to collect oversea if you have domination of the trade node. But in multiplayer games, it is quite complicated, and I think this is one of the problems with the trade system, because it can shift rather quickly without you noticing it. I mean, you remember when we had the bug where the merchant trade directions were changed when you're next to country?
Yeah.
Sometimes you did not really notice that until a few years in, and you noticed, oh, my trade income is quite low.
It's really
Why is
low.
that?
Or I'm in the red right now. I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly. So the system is a bit intransparent, even though they make a quite good job of visualizing many of the informations you have to.
Yeah, I think what they should do is tell you if someone is sending a big enough fleet or something like that into a node you control, or just tell you, like with the Cardinals, you get a pop-up when someone is influencing the Cardinal you're having, and he changes allegiance. Maybe they could build something similar if you are having over 50% of that trade and someone moves a fleet in to actually take it away. You would get a pop-up and be notified, okay, you have less than 50% trade power in that node, be careful. Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, or you could also improve the situation by just adding an information tab to the ledger, not the ledger, the outliner.
Yeah.
Instead of just showing merchant placed there, just show the trade nodes with your relative trade power percentage.
Yeah.
And then you could basically keep an eye on the developments. That would probably be a nice addition.
Yeah, that would be a nice addition as well. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think we pretty much covered almost everything we can talk about with trades. Now, what I wanted to talk about in relation with trade, because it pretty much ties into a lot of trading, is colonization, because at the moment I don't really see a big, let's say, reason to colonize if you don't want to increase your trade income. Because tariffs are ridiculously low, in my opinion. I can't really say why, but tariffs are usually lower than the tax income I actually get from the provinces and overseas, although they have ridiculous modifiers like minus 90% or something like that. I still get more tax out of the province than tariffs. And that for me means there's no reason to actually colonize if you can't successfully colonize most of the trade region of your desired colonization space.
Yeah, I think that is due to the fact that basically tariffs have been moved to trade value.
Yeah.
I mean, before that, you had basically a secure line to your capital. You just needed the certain amount of ships to get the tariffs, and they would magically teleport home. Now you have to actually control the trade routes from your colonies to the home country. And it's basically just a revamp or a rework to fit the new trade mechanics. And actually, I don't even know why they left tariffs in the game, because it's not really needed anymore with the trade system.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They could actually just call it production and be done with it. Because tariffs at the moment are practically the production you're getting in the provinces.
Yeah, and maybe some extra tax if you
a little bit of tax,
stuff like that. So, yeah, but the thing is, colonizing is indeed not as powerful as it used to be, and I think that's a good thing, because, I mean, it was a bit ridiculous in Era 3 when you just jumped right away into the fray and grabbed so much stuff and became so powerful. I mean, colonizing can still be quite effective in EU4. I mean, just imagine you get the quantity in I group or any other in I group that offers you additional manpower. And
even with the 50% reduction, it's still a lot.
If you can overcome the manpower penalty for overseas provinces, you can actually get a lot of manpower from colonies for your nation. And I think it's not as efficient to colonize provinces as it used to be, and I don't really have, I must say, I don't have the feeling or the concrete idea how you should be colonizing in a multiplayer game. Most of the time, colonizing is more about controlling the trade nodes. And one thing that is important, and we haven't talked about that because we forgot it when we talked about trade power and stuff like that. There's a province modifier called Important Center of Trade, and the other one is trade as the S2R bonus you get in certain provinces. That is quite
like
big.
Holland, for instance. I'm gonna show it right now. These two.
Some provinces basically are river outlets, estuaries, and they receive a huge trade value, trade power bonus for that. And this trade power bonus, actually, if you check the center of trade in the Central European, in the Antwerpen node, have two important centers of trade: Holland and Antwerpen.
Yeah, and Holland has the estuary of the Rhine River as well.
Yeah, so these modifiers are really important if you are colonizing. Colonize those provinces first, because this 5 points of trade power mean that you have a really powerful base of operation for controlling the trade node. This single province is worth like 3 or 4 other provinces in the early game because of this 5 points. And when you get the buildings that increase the trade power percentage, like, let me check, what was the building? Yeah, for example, the trade depot, 25% trade power.
I think even the docks give
25%.
you. Oh no, docks is actually flat income.
Road network and trade depot all increase the local trade power, and so do the tier 5 and 6 buildings. They also give like 50% local trade power. So if you combine all the trade buildings in these provinces, you get 100% extra trade power, and this estuary bonus is doubled, effectively as powerful as the tier 6 building. So
what you're saying is, actually, if you are not able to actually colonize a lot of stuff in the area, try and get these important centers first.
Yes.
And in the late game, if you didn't lose them already because some other big colonizer took them away from you, splash down the level 5 and 6 trade buildings, and that one province is actually as powerful as 10 others from the colonizer.
Well, not 10 maybe.
Okay, not 10. It depends.
A lot of
it depends, I guess, how many buildings they built as well there. Let's say they didn't build any buildings because they focused on building buildings in Europe.
Yes, so trade buildings are a really powerful building in overseas provinces. Asylum is another example where you can really have a huge impact on the local trade just by getting the province and improving trade buildings there. I think the 5 point extra from this province, basically, unless they really want to go tier 5 and tier 6, makes it maybe twice as powerful or 3 times as powerful as a normal province when you get the modifiers. So, and I mean, if you build the trade buildings and then they are also forced to do it, and then they can, for example, fortify these islands with high-level fortresses, which are, in my opinion, really powerful and important for overseas regions. So it's basically another game of forcing your opponents to employ a strategy to counter your strategy. If you don't build trade buildings, they don't have to. If you build trade buildings, they are probably forced either to do the same or to give up some of the trade value in that node, as long as you can control the provinces.
Matt is making another good point. Is it actually more effective to build trade buildings or just build another lightship?
From the cost versus efficiency standpoint, a trade building is a one-time investment that will never cost you any more money.
Yeah.
Let's say the trade depot is 75 ducats. That's like 3 lightships. And it gives you 1 trade value, so more income from the trade node, and 25% trade power. And that is not much in the early game. It is pretty good if you, for example, build it in Holland, because then you get like 10 extra trade value. Trade power means you have like 13, 14 there. Then you get like 2.5, 3 trade power.
Yeah.
So yeah, the lightships are probably more effective en masse, but I mean, you can also do it while building lightships. So basically, you will use your naval force limit anyway, and when you reach the 100% naval force limit point, I mean, you still want more trade power in certain areas, and you can't maybe project it without buildings. And
so the idea is it's just another tool to actually increase your trade power, because you won't be able to just rely on lightships. Somewhere along the line, you will have so much more lightships than you can actually support that the marginal benefit from building another lightship will actually decrease in comparison to the buildings.
Yeah, so in general, buildings are great in provinces that have high base trade power, also so the estuaries
Yeah.
and the
the
Central
important Central Australia.
exactly, and they are long-term investments that are not efficient in the early game, but become more efficient as the game progresses. And they have one big advantage: they cannot be destroyed. If you lose your light fleet in a war, that can be a tremendous setback and cost you a lot of trade value and trade power and
Yeah.
income until you have basically rebuild it. If the war drags on, you might lose 10 years of
Yeah.
trade income or something like that. And a trade building is basically safe from being destroyed unless conquered.
Yeah. Also,
So
it's
we have to mention blockading a province will reduce your trade power. So blockades are quite powerful tools in a war, apart from war exhaustion now, because you can basically shut down an enemy, even if you just a trade war is now possible because of that. You can wage a war without conquering provinces just by blockading stuff and forcing and reducing the trade power of an enemy in that area. You could basically blockade all the Korean provinces from a player to dominate the trade during the war, and maybe at some point unless he's able to break the blockades, he will lose money from the war just by you blockading his provinces.
Yeah. Also, I think you get some money out of it as well from blockading.
And I think it scales now. I don't know how exactly.
Yeah, they have a modifier, if I remember correctly. They have a blockade modifier somehow.
Yeah, it's called blockaded scaled, and I think it's scaled with the blockade efficiency. So as the game progresses and blockades become more efficient, the blockaded modifiers increase and basically counter the stuff you gain from buildings and NIs and decisions. Because, for example, the base blockade scale modifies minus 50%, but if you have like 100% extra of trade power from the buildings, that would not be as terrible as it would be when you scale it to like 3 times in the late game. So it's 150% reduction. And then
I think the British actually have something like that in their national ideas. Oh no, it's just embargo efficiency, not blockade.
Yeah, embargo efficiency, I don't really know what that does. I think it
reduces, I guess, the trade power you're getting in their provinces by a little bit more than normally.
Yeah, the other way around. They get less trade power, or you deny them more trade power.
Yeah, you deny them more trade power, I guess.
Yeah. So, but I mean, since Matty had asked the question, should we maybe let the audience ask a few more things?
Yeah, we could. I mean, if you have questions, feel free to ask them when we will get to them, definitely. And while you are getting to your questions or thinking about them, I wanted to ask one more thing, but I can't really remember what now. God damn it.
Was it about trade?
Yeah,
Right.
definitely, it was about trade. Never mind. I wanted to ask if you're something like Italy and you don't really have it was trade and colonization, especially because we talked about this. Italy has no way of actually getting trade from the New World into Europe. So would it actually be effective for a player who plays Italy to actually go to the New World? Does it make sense to do that? Or should he just try and focus on getting into Asia and maybe controlling Alexandria, denying it from the Ottomans or something like that?
Yeah, I think Italy would certainly be more interested in controlling Northern Africa and the trade routes from Asia. But, I mean, you could go to the New World and, well, you would be forced to collect overseas, so you would be vulnerable. But you could do it. But yeah, the geographical situation of Italy and the Mediterranean nations certainly favors exploration in the Far East. Which is actually quite interesting because, well, that creates some sort of geographical dependence on your further strategy and action.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I kind of like, but at the same time I don't really like that much, because it actually creates a need to plan ahead very well. If you want to colonize as France, for instance, you know where you should go, and you know, okay, I need to get there fast, because otherwise I won't get anything from it. If you're Italy, you know, okay, if I go into the New World, I will need to colonize a lot of stuff because I need to collect there. I can't collect in my home node. Or maybe I just want to go to Asia because there's gonna be less competition there and I can collect easier.
Oh, one thing we missed about competition is that stacking up merchants in the center of trade can actually be a quite powerful way to leech the center. I mean, I was playing England, for example, in one game, and I controlled the whole English Isles, and I had basically all provinces under my control. But still, because the I sent like 10 nations, sent merchants over there, and with all the modifiers they had and stuff like that, they were still able to leech like 5 to 10% from the center of trade. And because I had focused all the money there, it was actually a valid strategy. I mean, if they had deployed light ships, and some nations like the Netherlands did it, they were actually able to take away like 20-25% of the trade value from the center of trade despite my total control. So total control is really not as powerful as you might think, because light ships can always break in, and even if they are just a small amount, by concentrating trade value in a single node, you basically increase your vulnerability to other players leeching from that node.
That was another thing I've actually wanted to get to. Yeah, that's true enough. I mean, if you are sending all of your trade into one node, it's practically an open invitation to all the other nations to actually come there and get that trade for themselves as well. I mean, okay, for England, there's not many countries who can actually do that efficiently. They can send the trade to Antwerpen, and they can do that pretty easily, and they will leech a little bit of your trade. And if you have a lot of it in London itself, you will lose a lot more. But if you're something like France, I guess, yeah, you could just, you know, send the trade away so you can harm your enemy, but you wouldn't get much from it yourself.
Well, there comes another question into play, which Jekyll asked in the chat. Is it... just minimized it, sorry. Is it still worth to move capitals to certain trade zones? And this would be an example where it would be worthwhile as France.
Exactly.
You could basically move your capital to the Antwerpen trade node and then just leech the London trade node to basically leech off England's New World trade. If you, for example, fail to reroute any of that trade to Bordeaux, for any reason, maybe they have naval superiority and you don't have much naval forces left, you don't want to send them overseas where they're vulnerable, stuff like that. So yeah, it can be quite efficient to move your capital to other trade nodes. Basically, the more trade value a certain node has, and is it within reach for your capital redirection,
rerouting, or
no,
steering.
Not that. Moving your capital.
Yeah, replacing whatever.
English words. Anyway, the higher the trade value of a center of trade is, compared to your home center of trade at this point, the more efficient it is to move the capital. Even when they remove the 10% merchant bonus on collecting trade from the capital node, and I still haven't found out why, when, or why would they do that? Because it was a great point to actually have a merchant in the center of trade.
Yeah. Exactly. At the moment, there's no real reason to do that.
Oh, wait. I think... let me quickly check.
Yeah, in any case, while you check...
There we go.
Oh.
The bonus is still in. If you check the center of trade and you move the mouse over the plus icon from the detailed trade view. Yeah, the plus icon. On the left.
Oh, this one.
Left. No, yeah, further left.
Oh, this icon. Okay.
No, further to left. Left, the yellow cross.
Yeah. I'm there. It's only lagging a bit on the stream.
The stream. Yeah, because I'm watching you through the stream. There you should see a merchant present 10% bonus. That's the trade income modifier.
Oh yeah, I took the merchant out. Let's send him back and actually check it out. Let's see. Merchant present. Do we have that? Yeah, we do have it. So this is actually the income. Why isn't it stability sort by income modifiers and merchant mission? Huh. Weird that it's only on one of the things and not on the other.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. I don't know why they actually...
So this is 20 something income now because of that merchant. Let's recall him. Yeah, so you get a little bit in any case, that 10%. It's there.
Yeah, it's valid for all nodes, not just your home node. But basically, because you get a 10% bonus for the merchant placed and collecting in a node, it can be worthwhile to place a merchant in your home
Okay,
node.
so you practically, if you collect with a merchant, you get this 10% bonus on income. That's good to know. That's good to know. I actually didn't know that. That's very nice. Okay, so there's actually a valid reason. If the trade node is big enough, you should actually collect in your home node as well.
So, and Matty just wrote that the end nodes are are vastly overpowered to the other nodes, and
I must
well,
agree. At least.
yeah, it depends. It depends. I mean, the more trade you can move to the end node, the better. Yeah, and there's always a bit of trade coming through. But I mean, the situation will change over time. Example, let's think about a united Netherlands that takes control of the Netherlands node, and then most of the German miners that will cease to exist will not forward the trade there, and you can basically grab some income from all the nodes connected to them. So Antwerpen is really a great node to leech the other nations, and
Exactly,
basically
yeah.
a great Holland strategy or a Netherlands strategy could be to just maintain as large of a navy as you can and leech the most efficient node around you.
Yeah,
So
just go to
basically
London, Bordeaux, or Lübeck, whoever is biggest, and just get a lot of trade out of it.
steal their monies.
Yeah.
So that could be a valid strategy, but I don't really know if the end nodes are truly overpowered, because, for example, in the case of Venice, you can't lose the money you get into Venice, but on the other hand, there is also not a really great spot. So
yeah, there's not a real easy way to get a lot of money into Venice, like it is, for instance, to get it on the Atlantic coast into London, Bordeaux, and Seville, where you just get everything out of the New World easily.
Yeah, I mean, you are safe against leeching or forwarding the trade from that node, because you can't. But the position of these nodes is usually not really favorable, because they are deep within the trade network, and basically all the trade from the New World can be intercepted before it reaches your node. So you're safe if you get it into your node, but you have to get it there first, and basically you need a weakened enemy and a weak node to redirect the trade.
Yeah.
If Spain manages to take control of Caribbean trade and moves it to Seville, the chances that you see any trade in Antwerpen is slim. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you can reroute it from Seville, it will end up in Bordeaux, and then you have to compete against the French, and they have a lot of provinces in there, and it's really hard to compete against them if they have trade buildings in this area. So it can be powerful when you can direct the trade there, but
I think he's not saying it's as powerful for a country who only has that, but I think he's actually just talking about this situation we were saying, where France is moving its capital to Antwerpen. That would be an incredibly massive increase in income for France, I think, at least. Wouldn't that be true?
I mean, Bordeaux has the advantage that it's easier to reroute New World traders to them. So if you're doing good in the New World, you should leave your capital in Bordeaux and basically send all the trade value you can get from Chesapeake Bay or the Caribbean to Bordeaux. Mm-hmm. If you fail to establish a safe and secure New World presence, maybe it's easier to leech London and move your capital to Antwerpen, use your fleet near the channel to basically leech the Great Britain center of trade, and you are still within safe distance of any port if the English should be pissed off enough to declare war on you.
Yeah, and you need to consider the fact that even with this strategy, it's very dependent on how the game is progressing, because as we said previously, if the English or anyone else has complete monopoly over the New World trade, there's no reason for them to actually even redirect it to Europe, so you won't be able to leech anything out of London or Bordeaux or whatever. You actually need a circumstance where even for them it's more efficient to actually send everything back to Europe, because they would get more money out of it in Europe itself. It's pretty much a learning by doing situation. You need to actually play a lot, especially in multiplayers. I mean, I couldn't say how it's best to do it at the moment, but it's just, you need to adapt to the situation. If you see that a lot of trade out of the New World is going to the European centers of trade, yeah, by all means try and leech from them. If not, then I don't know if it's even worth to bother with it. I mean, you still get something, but if it's worth it, I don't know.
The thing is, basically, there is no perfect strategy for the trade game.
Exactly.
It depends on how your opponents are handling it and how you are handling it. It's basically like in other games where we have to adapt to the strategy of your enemies. And I think that what is important is you should always try to keep a presence in the trade nodes in overseas areas. At least get a province or two where you can station your ships, where you can get some trade power buildings to have at least some basic trade value power affecting the node, and where you can reach other nodes. Basically, getting a base in the Caribbean is probably a great idea because you can, I think you can send to Chesapeake Bay from there. You can influence Panama. Having a presence in the Ivory Coast can be a strong tool to harass Spain and Portugal and any other nation that is trying to go for Indian and Asian trade routes. The Gulf of Aden is a supreme chance for the Ottomans to deny the Europeans any trade from Asia by just leeching that node and redirecting it towards Alexandria. So there's a lot of strategic play involved in this, and you should try to get overseas territories and bases. Just for even a single province can be enough to take part in the great trade game. You don't need. It's nice to get them, and I don't really know at this point how efficient it is from a trade standpoint. I'd say it's good to get more territory, but even if you're late, just try to grab one province in overseas territories with trade nodes to have a chance to influence the trade.
Yeah, I guess what's important to say is whatever the situation, try and profit from this as well. There's no reason why you shouldn't try and get a foothold everywhere, just to be able to annoy anyone else if the situation demands it. Because trade is, at the moment, one of the most powerful or the most flexible incomes that you can have in the game. So you can profit a lot from it, but you can lose it as fast as you have actually gained it. Which is nice. But as we said, I hope they actually improve trading a little bit in the future. I mean, this is a very good start, but I would love to have a little bit of a more dynamic element to it. I'm not even saying it should be dynamic depending on the situation in the game itself, because I'm not really sure how that would be handled without giving room for a lot of exploits, where people just, create end nodes in London or whatever, and where you can actually create a pretty balanced trade system, but with slightly different trade nodes, slightly different trade routes. Maybe base it simply on decisions which some countries can get, or maybe base it on the date. On date it would be pretty stupid, I guess, but it's doable as well. The thing is, I'm not sure if giving the power solely to the player is a good idea. Because the
player will always try to exploit it.
Exactly. And if you have the option of creating end nodes, especially then, I mean, if you can reverse or trade directions, the trade flow direction, you can practically create end nodes everywhere. And I guess that would be another strategic element to the trade, where, let's say, Antwerpen and Genoa fight over which one of them is the end node of the trade, and they fight over this one trade route from Genoa to Antwerpen. I don't know. It may be an interesting thing to do as well, but
well, the thing is,
I don't know.
For one, you wouldn't really need redirectional trade routes for that. The thing is, what they actually probably need to do is sort of change, revamp, and improve the mechanics for trade nodes that are downstream of your home node. Because as it is, having trade power in a trade node that is behind or below your home trade node is extremely inefficient. You can't if you would be able to move trade value upstream with trade power to your home node, then the whole system would I don't know if the system would break from that, if the engine could even support that. But basically, the biggest problem at this point is that trade nodes that are behind or below your home node are almost completely worthless. And
Yeah.
I think they redirected the China trade routes because of that. I think the previous connection was from Beijing to, oh god, I'm gonna butcher this, Hangzhou,
Yeah.
or however it's called. And I think they
It's
reversed
Canton, I
direction.
think, called or something like that.
I mean,
The trade node, yeah.
you can use the TI cheat to uncover the
Yeah.
interpreter. Would be helpful.
Yeah, okay, so Huangzhou was actually here. Yeah.
Yeah, so the main problem is if you have trade power in a node downstream of your home node, it's really useless. The French suffer a lot of it, because the French have a quite decent presence in the Antwerpen trade node, but they can't use it for anything.
Yeah.
They get nothing out of that trade value, because there's a 80% penalty for trade power you have below your home trade node. You can't influence the trade value from that node. All you get is a few mega points of trade value in the next node upstream.
Yeah.
That is the thing they would need to change to make this more dynamic. If they would, for example, allow you to move trade value back to the previous node, your home node, for example, then the whole system could actually change again. And for example, the French could reroute the trade value from Antwerpen back to Bordeaux and stuff like that. I don't know if the engine would support that, but this is one of the biggest problems, in my opinion, with the trade system, that the low value of trade nodes that are behind your home trade node. Another problem is that you have only minimal influence on land trade nodes. I think if they would add some decisions or some
Events even, I don't care. Anything.
mechanics, something that gives you the option to influence land trade routes more than just having provinces. That
Like
would be a great
something
improvement.
like what were they called in U3? Trade agreements or something like that with your neighbors or people that are in the same trade node, or stuff like that. I think that'd be
Trade
quite nice.
posts. If you could, for example, establish trade nodes in other provinces, that would give you some trade power. That could be an interesting meta game. Just for example, a building that you can build in a foreign province that can be destroyed by war, just like basically the colonies
Yeah.
that we had against steppe nations in AO3, something like that. That lets you tinker and influence land trade a bit more. That would be nice. And yeah, even resolving the issue collecting abroad, that would be another thing.
Yeah,
that
wasn't there a lot of discussion on the forums, and I actually found the ideas quite nice. I've actually contributed to that. Make it, you know what? How the the U3 system with the focus province was, or the national focus, or whatever
National
it was
focus.
called. Yeah, why not build something like that, but for trade in U4? You know,
Trade
like
focus.
to actually collect out of the trade node. Let's say that's the national trade focus node. And you would be able to collect from that trade node without any kind of penalty. If you have trade power to begin with, of course. Because otherwise it could be exploited pretty badly.
Yeah, but even then we run into the situation again where everyone is just collecting in overseas provinces, and then you could basically just forget about all the trade routes, because it would be only important to move all the money to, let's say, Chesapeake Bay as England, and you would gather the trade there. And then nobody has a chance to compete with you if you don't get
Yeah,
a
I
trade
guess
power
that's...
penalty.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true enough as well.
I mean, it's really hard to solve the issue. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't even employ some sort of income penalty, because that would mean you could collect overseas to harm the income of other players that are
Yeah.
lying downstreams of the node and stuff like that. So it's a really tough thing. I don't really know if there is a good solution in the current situation.
Yeah, I mean,
This
these are a couple of things. Just these couple of things we discussed are possible solutions or possible starts for ideas that Paradox might use. I mean, either... I don't know. I don't know even. We talked about it. I mean, even just, you know, changing the flow of the trade by time or something to create this changing trade system where you can't just say, okay, now I got all of North America, I'm done. I don't even need to care about anything anymore because all of the trade is coming to me. But if the the flow would change a little bit, and maybe instead of going to, I don't know, London, it would go to, I don't know, something else, or there would be new nodes created in between, which would leech some of the, which would get other nations the opportunity to leech from them. I don't know, maybe that would help.
I mean, the other way you could do things would be to basically reduce the trade value of overseas territories, or you would add some sort of specific overseas good and make it very low trade value, and again increase the trade value increments you get from sending these trade goods forward. So you basically would have to send the goods from the New World to Europe to get certain trade value amounts.
So what you mean is actually do the reverse thing, what was the problem before, where the goods were practically very valuable and you would get a lot of income from sending it forward, and just do the reverse of the fix they actually did. Instead of reducing the amount you can increase the trade value with merchants, just decrease the initial trade value of the goods.
Yeah, this creates a lot of other problems, and you
Yeah,
would probably need some code and stuff. But if you could somehow create a separate trade good that would have a special rule, and you could basically say this trade good is only valuable if it reaches Europe, otherwise it's basically worthless. Then you could create a situation where forwarding trade would be important, where you could prevent the overseas leechings thing. But again, this is just a shot in the dark, and you can't really I think that the system is so complex that you actually need to think a lot about.
Yeah, exactly. This is not something
again.
they can patch or just make a small DLC for. That's something they need to actually rework from the bottom up, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I was thinking, just what does this trade flow actually mean? Because as much as trade went from the New World into Europe, especially when it came to cotton and tobacco and raw materials, there was a lot of produced goods that went from Europe to the New World as well. That was the idea of mercantilism, wasn't it? That you would actually sell the produced goods from your home country in the colonies and get the raw materials cheap from them. So maybe they could think about something like that, exactly how you said, just make the trade goods be worth more if they reach a certain area of the map of the world, or a certain region, and make others from Europe be only worth more if they reach the New World and the colonies or stuff like that.
Well, the thing is, basically what you are describing is regional markets. I mean,
yeah.
I hope that's the thing that they will add for Wiki 4,
yeah.
3?
Wiki 3. There's no 4 yet.
Oh, it's Wiki 3. Oh, yeah. No, so yeah, Wiki 3 regional markets would probably be a great thing in that game, and you could fine-tune them and make them more acceptable. Well, English words, they are difficult.
Yeah.
They would probably, so certain markets would pay more for certain goods, and they have to be moved there and there, and basically the system here is abstracted, and it's so abstract.
Definitely.
I don't think you should look at anything like goods being moved around on the
map.
map.
Definitely. It's practically the profit moving from the New World to Europe or something like that.
Yeah, and even then you could probably argue that even something like China would in reality benefit from trading with Europeans in some sort of way, and at this point they basically just lose their trade value to the Europeans. Maybe,
it's a little bit weird.
Inaccurate, I don't know.
Yeah, they need to maybe tweak exactly this a little bit. Maybe the provinces which contribute to the trade value of a node should benefit a little bit back from the trade. But I guess you could argue that that's what the tariffs are for. This is actually what tariffs are. It's the profit of the province for selling its trade goods to Europe or something like that. I mean, in the end, it's about how you imagine that things are represented. It's because, as you said, this is highly abstracted, so you just need to use your imagination a little bit and, you know, suspend your disbelief, because you can't create a 100% accurate trade system. I mean, not even Wiki 2 manages to, and it comes pretty close to being a good
Not
trade
even
system.
close. No. I mean,
Closer than everything else that I've seen in terms of games.
Yeah, maybe, but even there you don't have stuff like transportation cost, and you basically can sell radios from France and China and stuff like
I
that.
know.
So,
I mean, you still have those problems, but still, I mean, it's the most accurate I've seen a trade system come in a game.
yeah, I mean,
And by the way, hello, Klaus.
I mean, at some point, it stops being a game and becomes a simulation, and then it's probably not fun. So I think for EU3 and EU4, in this case, the trade system, the boost trade systems worked fine. EU3 trade system worked fine for the EU3 days. EU4 system now works fine for this iteration of the game series. It's functional, it does its job, it's not perfect, but it is okay, it is working. And I mean, it could be much more complex, and then nobody would understand it. I mean, even now, I think a lot of people have trouble grasping the trade system. So I'm fine with the way they made it and created it and designed it. It's functional, and I would actually like to see other stuff much more than an overhaul to the trade system. Stuff like internal politics are sorely missing from EU4.
Yeah,
definitely. Much more important for me.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of stuff they can actually add. I mean, the one thing I really want from the game at the moment is a improved religion system, because I think religion at the moment is just there to be there, and it doesn't do anything. It's just a minor inconvenience when you conquer stuff that's not your religion, and it's a little bit annoying when the religious, what you call it, Protestantism and stuff starts.
Yeah, and even that was improved a bit above EU3 with the religious unity and the new trigger for the Reformation itself, which I'm sure they will improve the religious system with the Reformation in a DLC or add-on. It's just screaming for that.
Yeah, but it was screaming for that since the early days of EU3, and they never really changed it. I mean, the only thing they added was the Curia system, and that's only for Catholicism. Of course, in EU4 they have the piety for the Muslims, and they have the patriarch authority for the Orthodox. But that's pretty much the whole extent of religion, and I think they can work on that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Paradox games are rough games. They always get better.
Yeah, better with time. It's like a good wine.
Yeah, I think I used that last season, didn't I? Episode, didn't I?
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But I think... Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've come pretty much to the end, and we've talked about pretty much everything that's relating to trade and colonization and strategy regarding this. If there are any more questions, now's the time to ask them, and I think we're gonna wait for like 2 minutes maybe to see if something comes up, and then we're gonna end. In any case, thank you for watching, the couple of people that did watch from the beginning and the couple that came later on. It was fun. Hopefully you'll join us next week as well. But yeah. Yes, it is possible to get into the show if you want to. I mean, we could talk about what we want to, discuss next week or something, because there's never too many people talking about EU4, and it's really nice. Some people know stuff. I mean, I learn each time I talk about the game. This time, especially the merchant increasing the income and stuff like that. Everybody has something to contribute. So yeah, that's definitely
totally
a thing.
wrong. Totally wrong. You should say that that he has to pay at least $100 to you, and then he comes into the lottery box and might have the honor to be chosen to be on the show. Stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wrong
I mean, yeah, wrong approach. Well, yeah, no, I mean, the show is still in its infancy. I can't have enough people wanting to actually contribute, because who knows, maybe one day someone can come and then I need to postpone it and stuff like that. It's always complicated now. And yeah, if you want to join the show, I mean, there's just add me on Steam and write to me, or just write into the subreddit or on the Steam group, whatever. There's a lot of stuff you can contact me with. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it right now. No more questions. Thank you for joining me again, Gaga. It was a pleasure as always. And I guess we'll see each other next week, maybe. So until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.